knows there's incredible customer demand in the aerospace and defense sector right now. We don't have anyone that does sales and marketing. We don't spend money on it, and we stay at pretty much max capacity. We have 2 facilities. We have a 3rd facility under construction. It'll be finished at the end of October, which is a new 60,000 square foot facility coming online. So we're trying to stay ahead in terms of capacity because there's not a capacity or a sales problem. It's the ability to deliver, right?
Yeah.
And do that reliable and trying to scale in a manner that allows you to do that elegantly and meet the specs.
All right, we are here live and making chips. Here at IMTS, it is amazing to be here. Mike, this is our first show just together.
First time we've done this together.
Without Nick or Jason.
Yeah.
We're going to try to carry the torch proudly. So it was 9/11 was a very somber day for our country, obviously. It was a big shift, I think, in what our country requires from the defense industry. I know it affects manufacturing in a huge way. And we have a very expert crew of folks here that are deep in those industries, and we're going to talk about the state of aerospace and defense.
Yeah, kind of where we were on 9/11, where we are now, and some issues going forward. There's a lot that's changed. It's crazy this morning when I was watching some of the stuff on the news. You think about how long it's actually been, because it doesn't feel like it was 23 years ago now.
Yeah.
I remember it so well. But a lot's changed.
It sure has. So I'm going to start by introducing 2 of our guests. Mike will introduce the next. So next to me is Heidi Schmidt from Schmidt Tool and Engineering, an amazing company just outside of Chicago here. 3rd generation, women-owned business. They have some amazing machines, I will tell you. I've been in their shop many times and serving the defense, aerospace and defense markets, firearms as well. So deep experience. I love these multi-generational businesses. And Ziki, my friend Mitch here, a serial entrepreneur. So this current Ziki is not multi-generational because you founded it, as you have done with many companies, but you are the founder of MFG.com, among many other businesses, and Ziki is an extraordinarily fast-growing machine shop.
Thank you.
We'll get into more detail.
Well, I'm thrilled to have a fellow Oklahoman here. Our shops are a couple miles away from each other. Matt Torres is the founder and CEO of Rise Armament, which is also in firearms and especially in triggers. I think it is your real specialty. You're talking about the shops. I've been in their shop a handful of times, and their automation and everything is great. I like it when I'll have vendors come to town. They're like, "Is there anybody we should go see?" I'm like, "You know what? Let me call Rise because you need to see their shop. It's a great shop." He's got a great crew. So yeah, happy to have you here too, Matt.
Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
So we wanted to start with asking about how your perspective after 9/11, how that changed, I guess, the defense industry. I'd love to start with you, Heidi.
Well, for a small shop, one thing that really had an impact for us is in 2002, the Federal Information Security Management Act was put forward, and that really was done to control unclassified information. So if I wanted to outsource to one of you and needed to, back in the day, fax a drawing, right? That's no longer an option. How do we reject our prints? How do we control and how do we keep our data secure within our manufacturing space? So I think that had, for us as a small shop, that seemed to have a big impact. It seems fluffy up front, and how do we implement this and make it cost effective and be able to comply? So
absolutely. And yeah, Mitch, obviously you didn't have Ziki at the time, but yeah, from your perspective.
Well, Ziki was started in 2014. Back when 9/11 event happened, I was running MFG.com. I think everyone remembers that day very well, waking up and seeing the shocking news, and I think it really stunned us all for quite a while. But being the resilient industry, the resilient nation that we are, we all just rose to that occasion. And I think from that point on, I think there was, in the aerospace and defense sector, there was a renewed vigor that came right back into it. Everyone realized the importance of that, the importance of a strong industrial base. And I think, we're still, lack of a better term, benefiting from that push that we all received.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul, you at the time I had a software company that served manufacturing at the time. You had an aerospace shop that at
we
the time.
were. I just started Pro CNC about 4 years prior. We had those first 4 years were really good for us. Times were good, and quite honestly, we were not prepared for what happened after 9/11. Having so much work in aerospace, that work just dropped off a cliff.
Right.
And we were quite honestly weeks away from bankruptcy. We didn't know how to run a business that was having a real downturn in terms of controlling costs. But once we got some help, figured that out, then that renewed push for needing more defense and aerospace manufacturing to support the efforts for, getting the terrorists and making sure we keep our country safe, that propelled our company growth for many years after that.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw that on the software side. Since we were doing software for manufacturers across a lot of industries, it seems like everybody kind of went through that same experience. It's like my friend that I know, like he's bought and kind of started a bank in 2008, right? And then we had the banking crisis. A similar story. Like you just get started and boom, it was gone.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Matt, what was?
Well,
You're.
I wasn't quite in the industry yet.
Yeah,
I was in a dorm room, and so I was still strictly in the consumer area during that. But in my generation, we started out with that, and we've lived with 20 years of war the whole time, and so it's kind of been the norm of ITAR and all of that kind of regulations. It's kind of what we grew up with, and went into that. So I don't know what it was like beforehand necessarily, but it's caused a lot of, with the companies I work with and everything, you can tell that they have worked with that in the past and they knew how it was. You can tell it's changed the landscape quite a bit.
It seems right now there's a lot of strife around the world. The defense industry, those shops that are serving it seem to be setting new records for revenue and just programs, and so much demand from this defense industrial base. Heidi, how have you guys been responding to that in terms of the demand and ramping up buying machines and people and seeing those opportunities to leverage them?
Yeah, so post 9/11, we were, going into like 2003, 2004, we were doing 30 to 40,000 fire control groups for the M16 or M4 a month, and that demand continued for 10, 12 years. So it was managing chaos. It wasn't planned. And now that we are in a position where we can actually plan for it, where do we get our efficiencies? We're adding equipment, modernizing our equipment, diversifying. We were primarily just a vertical machining shop, and we started with 1 Swiss, and now we have 9. And we started adding, we have 3 hydromats now and an index machine. So really diversifying what our capabilities are so that we can add additional parts to our repertoire of what we can make. So just diversification within our manufacturing capabilities is really where we've tried to focus.
Sure. Yeah, and Mitch, you've obviously, relatively new business, but grown immensely, really driving as a sales organization.
Yeah.
Tell us,
I think as anyone in the space knows, there's incredible customer demand in the aerospace and defense sector right now. We don't have anyone that does sales and marketing. We don't spend money on it, and we stay at pretty much max capacity. We have 2 facilities. We have a third facility under construction. It'll be finished at the end of October, which is a new 60,000 square foot facility coming online. So we're trying to stay ahead in terms of capacity, because there's not a capacity or a sales problem. It's the ability to deliver, right?
Yeah.
And do that reliable, and trying to scale in a manner that allows you to do that elegantly and meet the specs. At the same time, we're having to continue to grow our sophistication. Things like NIST 800 171 and all the other things that are coming along have really upped the bar at which you have to, for your team, your systems you have to put in place. So we've been busy putting all those things in place in order to continue to be a supplier to the top tier people that are producing weapon systems and things like that. And it's a pretty heavy lift these days. I think about how we continue to grow that base of suppliers, and it's going to be it's a tougher lift than it was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. So I think everybody, regardless of industry, but I know aerospace and defense and everywhere that we're all working, I think the common thing you hear, right, is workforce. There's not enough capacity. I mean, we've got buildsubmarines.com here. I think 6,000 people they're looking for, something like that. You've talked about some statistics the last few months about that you've known about. I think in aerospace, whatever the shortage number of people and shops and so forth is. I know you've invested heavily in automation and great processes and people and so forth. And you've been around the show now for 2.5 days. What's the stuff you see on the market now that's going to help us fill that capacity, the lack of capacity?
Yeah, so, when we were starting out early on, Tulsa, Oklahoma is a big area for oil and gas, and we just simply didn't have the budget to compete with other machinists, on that. So we had to figure out something different. And that's what really forced us into the automation. So I'm really glad to see around the show that I think there's a lot of automation around, and it's becoming more of the norm. And really, I mean, it's an iterative process. I don't know if you guys have seen that before. It's like just step into it and find out that it's an iterative process. It's not going to be perfect. Nothing is, but try it, learn, and go from there. Yeah. The next step's really going to be the connectivity, right? I mean, you can start with the machine data that you get from the machine spindle data and that kind of thing. I just heard of it's like something like 1,000 hertz of data comes through. That's a lot of data. So we're going to need like AI to evaluate that and really connect that and be useful to us and to go forward. So that's a really cool thing to do. Just a couple days ago, we had Theo from Cloud NC up here, and that kind of stuff. And so it's really going to come down to where we have to be more efficient and figure out how to be more effective with our production time. Because I heard that in about 2030, early 30s, they're projecting that we're going to be at 1.9 million productive jobs of a shortage, and it's already bad right now. So it's like we're not facing a skills gap, we're facing a skills crisis, right? And so we have to figure out a way to get there, because it's a challenge. It's a big opportunity for American manufacturing, right?
It is a big challenge.
So.
Yeah, Paul, you've talked about it. I mean, just the national security threat alone of
For sure.
not having this capacity in production. And
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but I've certainly read that the number of shops supporting the defense industrial base has actually shrunk considerably over the last decade or 20 years.
Sure.
So I think as more regulations comes in, as it's harder to do business with the government, there's more hurdles to jump over. Obviously, the CMMC thing, it's a burden, but it's certainly understandable. We don't want our adversaries stealing our technical data. It's not a big surprise that the latest fighter out of China looks just like the F-35, which is unfortunate.
It is really important for us to protect that data. I remember being at a conference years ago, and Leon Panetta was the Secretary of Defense at the time, and he was talking about the theft of our data and our adversaries being able to create weapon systems that were nearly equivalent.
Yeah.
And narrowing our gap. And this comment that stuck with me was Mr. Panetta said, if our warfighter is ever fighting a fair fight, we have failed them. And,
That's a good way to think about it.
And I think this is part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect that data in our systems so that our warfighters don't ever have a fair fight.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, I think of, when we talk about aerospace defense in this sector, I think of it as sort of three actual different sectors. So there's commercial aerospace, right? There's the Boeings, Airbuses, Bombardier, private. There's private space, obviously incredibly busy right now. SpaceX is launching rockets like every day or two.
right.
Blue Origin, Relativity, there's so much there. And then of course there's just traditional defense, supporting the warfighters. how are either of you seeing the differences in what your customers are needing in terms of demand or volumes, or how often they're ordering, or even just requirements they're requiring of you to serve those specific little niches? Want to start, Heidi?
I mean, I guess for me, I would go back to the CMMC, which is a layer on top of the NIST, and that was originally voluntary self-auditing, and now I think maybe September, October 2025, it'll be third-party audited. So the hurdle to do business with the government is raised, but it's a necessary, obviously a very necessary step that we have to take. We're a small shop. We have 100 employees, and getting our employees up to speed of how we can comply gives us the diversity to easier move into other sectors. We're fully firearm defense. We want to get into other sectors. And by reaching those compliances, because it is through DFARS, ITAR, DOD, NASA, it's the same compliance. It allows us to try to diversify, and it gives us the opportunity to serve other sectors. And for us, again, being primarily firearms, when the defense spending is high, usually the commercial spending is low. So we can see that balance. So it's important for the diversification. And honestly, the CMMC will give us that opportunity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see the gamut in terms of order volume and repeat, right? We have a lot of the space companies, they're low volumes, right? They're low volumes, they're complex, not just on the machining, but on the technical finishing and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we've got repeating orders for commercial aircraft that we get 3-year purchase orders for, and those are amazing because you can plan in advance and deliver every month for years. But, I think, urgency is everyone's issue, right? Everyone wants it faster, faster, faster. The elephant in the room is our biggest challenge with faster, faster, faster is finishing.
Yeah.
Right.
We can turn the parts around pretty darn fast with machining, getting that done. But then it goes external for the finishing, and that's everyone's real challenge these days. And that's where we're going to have to do some work on that supply chain.
Yeah. And you, Matt?
So as far as diversification, that's always a tough one, and we always have that debate internally because most of our products, almost all of it's direct to consumer, and we're still on a pretty good growth trend. And so it's always the eternal. It's like focus. You want to get things done right. You got to focus as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, right? But you also want to protect yourself because, like right now, I don't know if inflation, the economy, that kind of thing is causing some suppression of demand a little bit. It makes it really tempting to like, okay, let's go jump into this, and you have that shiny object syndrome almost. And you want to do that, and it protects it. And it sounds like a great strategy, but you do have to have some level of focus just as a business, so you can not take away from what the value that we're actually providing to our customers. So we always go back and forth on how we do that, and we do want to diversify and get into that to be more foundationally strong as a business. But it's got to make sense to us internally, our core competencies and our customers.
Paul, I think you visit more shops in a year than most of us might do in a lifetime. I think you've probably been to all of our shops, I think, at least once. And
Sure have, yep.
where do you see it? I mean, you talk to so many various owners and so forth. What are you hearing from them?
I mean, it's interesting right now. There are shops that are setting records. There are shops that don't have enough work. And I think the difference is how progressive they've been on adopting technology, both on the machine side, on the software side,
right.
And quite honestly, how aggressive they are in being sales-driven organizations, right? I know, your brother Eric is always out there selling. You're a consummate salesperson. You guys clearly are a market leader.
I've found that to be a huge. So we started out as a contract manufacturer, and I'm not naturally a salesperson in marketing and that kind of thing. And it kind of took me a little bit to get. Really kind of had to be shoved off the edge to get into the market and be responsible for our own marketing and selling. So I kind of have that 20/20 vision when I go in and look at other machine shops and like that.
Right.
And I'm thinking that's the biggest thing. If we just had marketing and selling and be more focused on that, that's like, I'm sure you guys have found it in your business. It's kind of the key to having a really successful shop, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that comes naturally for a lot of shop owners. I don't know how many out here today are came from like a sales profession versus a technical profession and decided that I'm going to start a shop because I could do it better than my boss or whatever. But yeah, what would you say to shops that maybe aren't naturally as like ready to just like get their sales and marketing motion really dialed in terms of their opportunities for growth?
Sales is not my area. But having enjoyed a very captive audience for a number of years, in order to diversify, even though I consider myself a third generation, fairly mature company, we've been hiring in sales. And so we're not as small a shop, but we've had that same hurdle. You need to invest in the people, invest in the marketing to get the awareness, and get to places like IMTS to get out there and see what people are doing and where the next trends are, to see where it applies to you, right? To grow into that area.
Yeah.
I think that the number one lead generator, sales generator is a happy customer.
Yeah. Sure.
That happy customer tells more customers, they become evangelists, and that is a snowball that just builds over time, right? And sometimes it's hard to throw money at that and try to prejudice that curve. There's a certain curve that's going to happen. And I believe that just, servicing customers, thanking them for the business, good communication, doing what you said you would do. And if you can't communicate it, let them know. That will win so much favor with them that they become loyal. And then ultimately there's people from that company that tell others, or an engineer that leaves and goes to another company, and it just starts to build. And, with some businesses that I've mentored and stuff, I've just seen this happen over and over again. Focus on making customers evangelists, and you don't really have to be in sales. You just have to just do what you say you will do. It's really doing the basics well.
Yeah, and then those engineers and those buyers, of course, move companies, and they call you from that new company and they say, "Hey, can you quote these parts?"
That's it. That's the best sales tool there is.
Absolutely.
The biggest thing that I've recognized that's really helped me is the mindset that you go into providing sales. Salesmen kind of get a bad stigma because of bad salesmen. We never really recognize good salesmen because what they're doing is solving our problems, right? You don't even recognize you're being sold to. So if you can go in the mindset that you have a good, valuable service, and most shop owners do, that's what they do. They're very technical. They can provide a really, really good service. So if they care about the customer and they look at it, they're just solving the customer's problem. That's it. And so they just have to ask enough questions to figure out what they're really looking for, and then and that will help actually get the customer out of their own way. And if you can look at it from that standpoint, it kind of, for me at least, kind of breaks it down to where it's almost like any other mechanical process of that sort of thing, instead of having to worry about sales techniques and saying the right thing and that kind of
thing. Those don't work.
No, they don't. Not at all. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many books you read on it, right? It's just like, it's two things: leads, and that's constant activity. Interact with your people. People follow you on your page. Interact with them. Reach out to them just constantly. And people are busy, so if they don't respond, follow up. It's basic stuff. And then you have the close. Then you have to sell them, and that's just providing your service. Just tell them, teach your customers or prospective customers, and how are you going to solve their problems?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can solve a lot of problems just through communication, right? I mean, how many times is someone's just fight something on their own, and they didn't communicate, and I'm thinking even like on the shop floor, right? Like you look later, why did that take so long to set up, or why is this runtime? And someone's out there just struggling and fighting, and all they had to do is ask somebody that maybe did it last time, or in all of our cases, look at the notes in ProShop. I mean, there's just some sort of communication could have solved so many problems, whether it's sales or operations or on the floor. And it's almost like I saw a meme the other day I sent to my team. It was like, did you talk to the customer? Well, I called him, or I sent him an email. Well, did you call the customer? I sent him a text.
Pick up the phone,
like,
right?
Call the customer, right?
Pick up the phone.
Just pick up the phone and call the customer. And I've had that conversation internally so many times where Like, well, I texted them, I called them, or I didn't call them. It's like, okay, just call. And then they come back, they're like, oh, I talked to them, we're all good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is interesting how many people have an aversion to picking up the phone these days.
Right.
Yeah.
But the over communication goes a long way, right? I mean, if manufacturing is easy, everybody do it. It's not. Every day we're solving problems. There's a challenge. Something in the house or out of the house goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
And as long as our customers know before the crisis hits them, they're usually pretty good about it, right? So it's the over communication of
They understand problems. They just can't understand not knowing about those problems, right?
Yeah.
exactly.
Nobody's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, I sometimes say bad news does not, age well like a fine cheese or wine. You got to deliver it. But I can remember being afraid to pick up the phone and call someone and say, we screwed up something and we're not going to be on time. But they want to know sooner than later, so yeah. Mitch, you mentioned earlier about the supply chain with platings and coatings. I know of some shops that are actually starting plating companies or buying them to bring it in-house. Anything that you're thinking of or that you're seeing doing?
Very interesting and timely. Absolutely.
Is that what your third facility
and
is?
We're, I would say we're 95% there on the decision to start our own plating business, just because of the pain that it causes us, right? And, it's not necessarily the money that you spend on that service. It's the lead time. It's the damage that happens to parts. It's the lack of, I guess they're having the same troubles with skilled labor. And so you get parts back that were masked incorrectly or something. And it causes a lot of pain to our customers. And so I think it certainly warrants an analysis of whether or not it makes sense to control that. So we're pretty far along in that analysis. So I think that's a high probability that we're going to do that.
Yeah, one of my podcast guests on Machine Shop Mastery said they're not in a position to start a plating company, but they are very proactive with their vendors. They call them, 2 weeks before the job is going to be cut. It's like, hey, how's your capacity right now? What are your lead times? Anything I can do to help, And sometimes it's even things like, I got 500 parts to plate. They can't rack them and plate them that way. Like, send me 100 at a time over 5 days, and that's an easier thing to consume, and they can start getting you partials back. So, just treating your vendors extraordinarily well, they're going to put you at the top of that list. Again, communicate with them, find out what can you do to make it easier for them. I know in our shop, we always had what we called outside processing prints, right? Where it's a version of the print that's marked up specifically for wear your mask, big highlighted in red, what pulls do you have to plug? This is a cosmetic surface. Because, they're facing the same issues of lack of skilled labor.
We do a lot of that as well, because when you look at a print and the masking call outs or the finish, it's really confusing, to a skilled, people like they're doing it every day, much less you pass that down to a finishing company and expect them to interpret that.
Yeah.
And I think that's expecting a bit much. So I think the finishing print is a great way to do that. It really helps them.
So there's also been a lot, we know that Boeing has had some struggles lately. I know, talking about the different sectors, commercial aerospace, I think for some parts is down a little bit. The 737 is not running at the same rate that it used to. I know they're trying to ramp it back up again. But let's talk about product safety for a little while. I don't know how in the world you don't have a record whether a door was bolted on and a sign off that work was done. But let's talk a little bit about traceability and just, auditability for quality records and things like that. Serving the defense industry, as you guys do, I'm sure, very methodical traceability, record keeping.
Traceability, lot traceability, for sure. As you know, we run Pro Shop, which certainly helps us in this endeavor of, tight shop floor control. All of our processes heavily documented. Our quality department is always evolving, and where can we make sure that we're taking out any of the added steps that could, even we redesigned the shop floor recently. You just need one job to miss heat treat and get to the wrong position, right? So you're always looking at where you can lean it out, make sure that the process is very well documented to make sure that we're controlling the movement of all the product and keep that lot traceability.
For companies that aren't in that sector yet, and I know it's, given how strong these sectors are right now, there's a lot of shops that want to get into it. What would you say to those companies that as things they can do to start getting themselves ready for serving a defense industry and being able to meet the requirements that, whether it's cybersecurity or quality or certifications?
It's a heavy lift, and so you have, it is, be prepared that it's going to take time, right? And you have to do it somewhat organically. But before you start trying to get into the flight hardware phase, you need to start executing as if you are.
Yeah.
Paying attention to your calibrations, to your trainings, to your machine maintenance, your documentation, chain of custody stuff, making sure you have certs on everything. That takes systems, that takes processes, that takes training. It has to become part of the culture as well, because you can have all the great systems, but if the culture isn't supporting it and buying in, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And so, I think people have to understand if they want to go into the flight hardware, if you will, type of defense area, it's a journey. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be well worth it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be frustrating, but it's going to be well worth it. But it is a journey, and you have to adopt tools. I'm going to do a shameless plug for ProShop here. Paul knows I looked at everything, and I tried to find something else that was well suited, that could handle all of that traceability and chain of custody and everything we needed to do. And it was the most well thought out system that I could find, and I did a lot of due diligence on it.
Well, thank you.
So,
The interesting.
I'd ask you a similar question, but not so much currently. What are these challenges that we're faced with, but what do you see as that next set of challenges over the next couple of years that our industry in general is going to face, or what are you seeing around the show that's going to handle that?
So, I mean, we've got to consider the global economy, the global supply chain. For one, we saw that a couple of years ago where we had supply shortages, things like that. And so there's a lot of localization back into, or reshoring back into, which is great for America, but we've got to be ready for it. And so we've got to be able to prepare for that sort of thing. And so I would suggest people start looking into have a solid foundation. So systems like ProShop or whatever you might be, but have it a simple system ready to go. So you have that foundation for if you need traceability, if you need whatever you might be doing, and then start building from there. And you can start getting into more automated processes and systems and things of that nature. But I would suggest, and Warren, don't get too complicated too quickly. Me, naturally being an engineer, I'm really skilled at making things really, really complicated. And so simple is hard, right? But it's what's needed. And so I would start with that and iterate and go forward with that, because there are a lot of tools that you can start with here, from on the programming or even to help out the prove out side that you can do in software and not in the machine, and you can save some machine time in that. And all the way down to the production, of course, and into quality. And so you can automate those kind of things. You can pick and choose whatever your constraint is at the time, and then go from there to hopefully be more productive, right? That's the whole goal.
That's great.
That's great advice. As we look to wrap up here, maybe Mitch and Heidi, just one other suggestion for shops that really want to serve this industry, get into it. What would you suggest they might do as a step?
Yeah, I would say start off at prototyping flight hardware. The space companies, the aerospace companies. There's a lot of work for them that is below the flight hardware level. Start off there. You begin to learn the expectations, how to do business with them, how to understand the flow downs, everything that goes along with it. And then while you're doing that, treat it as if it's flight hardware. Work up that curve, put the systems in place, get the culture in place, get the training in place. And I think you're going to have to make investments. And then a lot of those investments are in infrastructure, whether that's the IT infrastructure along CMMC and NIST, that's people infrastructure, that's a dedicated QMS manager, because you really need that. And I think, don't try to do it overnight, just make those investments along the way but start treating your prototypes as if they're flight hardware.
Great advice. Heidi, do you have any pearls of wisdom?
I would say use your resources. I haven't found a shop or a friend in the industry that's not willing to take me for a tour or show me what they do. How do they apply processes or applications to solve these problems, right? And sometimes, whether they're new into the industry, sometimes smaller shops, it's a easier hurdle to a certain extent. You have a little bit more control. So build out the process and scale it. And one thing you said earlier resonated with me. It's a journey, and this journey doesn't end.
Yeah.
You never get there. There's always the next improvement, the next set of compliance, whatever it is. And so don't ever feel that you have to get to here and now you're capable. You slowly move your way into it and use your resources.
Yeah, that's
Great
great.
advice. Thank you.
Well said.
Well, I think that about wraps us up for the
think
day. Appreciate all of your wisdom, things that people can do to increase their support of the industry, making chips for the aerospace and defense industry, because we know what we say.
You're not making chips, not making money.
Making money. Bam.
Bam.